Greetings everyone, I'm Kevin and I'm going to talk to you about the culture shocks that I as a Swede get from reading American books. So I made a list of all the culture shocks that I have gotten and I ended up with 11 things, and I divided them into 3 categories: everyday life, identity, and school, because I'm a teacher. So I'm going to go through them in order. So the first one is everyday life, and something that came as a shock to me from all of the books I've read, but also a lot of the movies that I've seen and TV shows, is frosting. You have frosting on everything. The thing that was really shocking to me is that you put frosting on cinnamon rolls. Like, what? So this is cinnamon roll in the US and this is cinnamon roll in Sweden. Different. Yeah, I know. The second thing in everyday life that is a big culture shock to me is how common and normal it is to have guns. And I live in a country where owning a gun is illegal for everyone. Like, you're not legally allowed to have a gun. Like, if you're a police officer, you need a permit to have a gun. And if you're a hunter, you need a permit to get hunting guns. Like, you can't get whatever gun you want, and when buying guns you have to show that you have a permit so that you can buy the guns. Like, you can't just go to a gun shop and be like, I'm gonna buy that gun. If I would be seen, or if someone would come to my apartment and say like, oh, you have a gun, I will break the law and I will either pay a fine or serve some time in jail. Yeah. So it's completely different from reading American books where guns are common. Like, in the stories, it seems so normal to have guns, that people have guns, and people talking about getting a gun, or people talking about owning a gun or having a gun, or like stuff like that. And it's so weird to me because we don't have that. And number 3 in everyday life is healthcare. And I think this is still very weird to me because in some of the stories that I have read or seen, like on television, have been very depressing because a character, usually the main character, is trying really hard to get money because someone in their family has an illness that is curable. Like, you can cure it, you can save that family member, but in order to do so you need a lot of money. And that is weird to me because in Sweden everyone gets healthcare. Like, you don't even have to be a Swedish citizen and you will get healthcare. Refugees get healthcare, and people seeking asylum get healthcare. If you are a student, an exchange student in Sweden, you will get healthcare. And of course you will pay a sum of money, but like, if you're younger than 20, it's nothing. Like, you don't pay, it's free. At least for Swedish citizens, you don't pay anything for healthcare until you're 20 years old. Like, in some cases you do pay, but it's never like more than a few hundred Swedish krona. So that is like not that much. Like, in Sweden, if you have a deadly disease or you have something that is curable and serious, you will get the treatment and it will be affordable and it will be like quality healthcare. And I know that there's this argument going around in the US that affordable healthcare or free healthcare or cheaper healthcare means that the quality is less, which is not true. Having free or affordable healthcare in Sweden doesn't mean the quality less. It just means that the people are healthier. Like, that's what it means. Like, for me that is normal, but from reading about what healthcare is like, at least in the fiction I've consumed, it's nothing like that. So I apologize if the frame has changed. My battery died, so I had to change it. So the last thing under the everyday things culture shock category is writing checks and paying in cash. I didn't think people actually wrote checks today in modern time. Like, these check books, you like piece of paper you write on and you give it and they take it to the bank and get money. That doesn't exist in Sweden, and it hasn't existed in Sweden for like 30 years or more. So it hasn't been around for a long time, and I didn't think that was a thing in another country. Like, what? So that was just a huge shock for me that people actually write checks. Like, it's just like, you know, mind blown kind of thing. And the second thing was paying in cash. And I say this whenever I have a friend overseas from another country coming to Sweden. I say, whatever you do, don't go to an ATM and take out money. Don't do it. And the reason is because 90% of Swedes pay by card. We have a lot of shops in Sweden that do not accept cash. Like my favorite coffee shops in my town, neither of them accept cash. And you pay with card or you pay with an app, and that's what you do. You don't pay by cash. So then we're moving on to the second category of culture shocks, and this time it's identity. And the first one is something that I have actually talked to my friends and my grandma about quite a bit, and it is Americans referring to themselves as Swedish. This is very interesting, I think, because I've seen it as well on YouTube, Swedes talking about this, and on on the internet and in like articles and stuff, Swedes talking about this. It's very weird for Swedish people if you refer to yourself as Swedish when you don't live in Sweden, because like if we would go as a tourist to your country and you ask like, where are you from, and we say Swedish, like we're from Sweden, and you say, oh, me too, then we will talk Swedish to you. And we expect, like if you say that you're Swedish, we expect you to speak Swedish. And if you can't speak Swedish, people won't take your national identity seriously. And it's harder for Swedes to accept Swedish people or people who refer to themselves as Swedish if they don't speak Swedish. We are a small country and we are very like reserved people, and we are traditionalists in a lot of ways. We are very welcoming to other people, especially like most Swedes are welcoming and a few Swedes are not, and they are of course very loud. We are a welcoming people, and if you come from another country and you come to Sweden and you visit Sweden, we are thrilled about that, and you will see Swedes wanting to help you and guide you and explain everything to you because they're enthusiastic about our country. So that is kind of like a thing that is weird. Like that is a culture shock in the way that it feels like it's in a way easy or common for Americans to refer to themselves as part of a nation or a part of a nationality that they have never, like it's a country they've never been to. Maybe they don't even know the flag of the country and stuff like that, but they can refer to themselves as part of the country, and that is very weird for us. And the second thing in the identity category is POC, people of color. It's not a concept that exists in Sweden. Like people of color is not something that exists here. And I think from my understanding of what POC and people of color, what that means has to do with like the documentation, because I know that in the US you have documents that you check a box and you check whether or not you're black, whether or not you're Latinx, whether or not you're white, Asian, like stuff like that. That you have a paper that says what ethnicity and religion you have. And we don't have that. And so the whole people of color thing is not something that exists in Sweden in like the Swedish context. And the word, like the term people of color, is also very interesting because we use the word colored when we talk about black people, or what in the US would be referred to as black people. And the word black in Sweden, like the Swedish word for the color black, is not really an acceptable word to use for people of African descent. Like you should not use that. If I have a student who would refer to someone else, someone who is colored, as we would say in Sweden, färgad, but as in the US you would say black. I'm saying colored because I'm talking about the Swedish context right now, so that's why I'm using colored instead of black. So if I have a student who would point at a colored person and say, you're black, or that person is black, I would take that student to the principal's office. Like that's how offensive that word is. I know it's very weird. I think if you're watching this, the word colored has a negative connotation in other countries. Like I know that if you refer to a person of African descent in the US, you should say black. But in Sweden, it's the opposite. And the last thing I wanted to talk about relating to identity is the word race. And you have noticed that I don't say race, I say ethnicity. And that is because in Sweden, we don't say race, we say ethnicity. Because the word race does not exist in Sweden. We used to have that term as an an accepted term, but it was abolished in 2014 because the word race, having the word race is racist, and seeing people as part of different races is racist. Like, that is the definition of racism. So the Swedish government decided that we can't have this word anymore. Like, we need to abolish this word, and so we did. It was abolished in 2014, so it's been a while since it was abolished, and it's been a while since the word was abolished. And in Sweden we don't talk about race, and it got like a whole like debate around that. The organization for African Swedes, they have their own organization where it's kind of like they can bring up issues that they as a minority face and stuff like that. And they had a representative who came out and said, like, don't do this, don't abolish the word race, we need to keep that in order to fight racism. And I completely understand that point of view, that if we erase the word race, we wipe racism under the rug. Like, that's the argument that she presented, that if we erase race as a word, how can we talk about racism? How can we fight racism if that word does not exist? And the government representatives, they said, like, yeah, but the word race in itself is racist, so of course we can't have that. In order to fight racism, we need to abolish that word, because that word in of itself is racist. And I also want you to know, like, a little bit of context. In Sweden, around the time of World War I, Sweden got a race biology institute. And as you probably understand, race biology is the science behind categorizing people according to race. And like, a lot of harm was done to a lot of communities in Sweden in the name of science, in the name of race biology. And this institute did a lot of harm, and our indigenous peoples faced a lot of harm and a lot of shame and discrimination and harassment in the name of race biology. Abolishing the word race was kind of a way to redeem ourselves and not wipe that under the rug, but kind of do that as an act of sympathy empathy with the communities that were hurt by the existence of that word. So by abolishing that word, the whole point of abolishing the word race was to communicate the fact that it doesn't exist, and people aren't the race. They aren't a category of humans. They are humans. Abolishing the word race was a way to kind of tell the indigenous peoples that we know that we cause you harm with this word, and we want to do right by you by erasing this word, not to wipe anything under the rug, but to own up to the mistakes that we did. That is just a little bit of context for why the word race is abolished, and that is why I don't say race when I talk about the Swedish context, because the word race does not exist in Sweden. So how can I use a word to talk about the Swedish context of things where the word doesn't exist? Like, that doesn't work. So I say ethnicity when I talk about Sweden, but I do say race when I talk about the US, because that is the term that you should use in that context. So I just want to put that out there so you understand. So then we're on to the third and final category of culture shocks, and this is school. And I am a teacher, so I had to bring this up. And the first thing that I find so weird about the US school system is clubs and teams as part of the school. That you have school-specific teams and school-specific clubs, and you can represent your school in tournaments and stuff. Like, what? Like, that is something that I didn't think existed. Like that is just so weird. That is so weird. Of course we have clubs and we have these extracurricular things, but they have nothing to do with your school. They have to do with your city. So if you want to play hockey, you don't have to like think about which school you go to. You can pick whatever hockey team you want to play in. And so it's just very weird to me that there are actual sports teams and clubs in schools. We didn't have anything like that. I have never been part of a school club because they don't exist, and that is still very, very weird to me that they exist. I really like the idea of clubs in school, but I don't know, I have no idea how they would actually work in Sweden. I don't think they would work in Sweden, like as part of school. I know that we have these things as part of the city. Like the city has clubs for you. The city has spaces for our students if they want to do like extracurricular. You go to you don't go to the school for the clubs, you go to the city. So that is a big like what? This exists? Like what kind of school is this? And the second culture shock relating to school is the hall pass. I am still confused about this one. Like, do you actually, like in reality, like I only know this by fiction, that you raise your hand and you ask your teacher, hey, can I go to the bathroom? And you get an actual thing handed to you that is a hall pass. What? I don't understand what that is. I do not understand what that is. We don't have that. The thing in Sweden, like I say, I'm a teacher. If I have a student who needs to go to the bathroom, they can just leave the classroom and go to the bathroom. They don't have to tell me, hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Like, you don't have to say that, because we keep track. If we feel like, okay, this student has been gone for a while, we will put you as absent for that amount of time. Like, that's something we do. And during tests, you are not allowed to go to the bathroom. So if you leave the classroom during a test, you will have DNF'd the test. And we will take the test in, and if you only completed half of it, then we will only grade the whole test with answers for half of it, which means that you will get an F. So if you didn't go to the bathroom in between breaks, sorry, you're not allowed to go during tests. That's how it is. But like the hall pass, I became British. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay. We don't have a hall pass. We don't. And I still don't understand the whole concept, and I want to know who came up with it. Like, who decided that, you know what, in order to keep track of our students, we can only have them go to the bathroom one at a time, and in order to know what students are allowed to go to the bathroom, we will give them this thing that they can use, and we will call it a hall pass. Who came up with that? I am genuinely curious. Honestly, like, that is so weird. That is super weird to me. And then we have subjects. So the subjects in school is so weird. Like, you have the subject geometry, algebra, and calculus separately. Why? We just call it maths. Like, that's it. We have just the class maths, including all of these. So it's just very weird to me that you learn like literature separately, English separately. Like, why? Why do you separate the things? Like why? We just have, as I said, we just have biology, chemistry, social science. And in social science in Sweden, it's geography, history, and social science. Unless you're in upper secondary school, then history is separate. But geography is part of social science, and politics is also part of social science. And it's just very weird to me because, as I said, we have the umbrella term as a subject. We don't have the individual things as different subjects. So you can learn geography, algebra, and calculus in maths, and you will only get a grade for all of these in maths. You have all of these things. Like, these in the US free subjects are graded as one subject in Sweden. And it's just very weird to me that you would separate the things. Like, that is very, very odd. Obviously, I'm very surprised about that. And then we're on to the absolute last culture shock that I want to talk about, and that is tuition. And it's the same thing as with, okay, it's not the same thing as with healthcare, because healthcare costs a little bit. School is completely free. And the thing is, if you're a refugee in Sweden and you have a kid, that kid has a right to Swedish education because they are a kid in Sweden. So if you come to Sweden seeking asylum, your kid will be in school. And in these schools, they get lunch completely free. You don't pay for lunch. Like, you don't have to think about lunch for your kid because the school will provide lunch free of charge. Some schools also offer breakfast. And in upper secondary school, lunch completely free. And some schools have breakfast. Like my first upper secondary school offered breakfast for €1. I paid €1 for a breakfast buffet. I could eat as much as I wanted. It was, when I say it was a breakfast buffet, it was a breakfast buffet. It had everything. But yeah, tuition is completely free in Sweden. You don't have to pay for upper secondary school, primary school, college, university. You don't have to pay anything for those things. And in upper secondary school and university, you get paid by the government to study. Like you get paid to study in Sweden if you study upper secondary school and university as a Swedish citizen. Like that doesn't work if you're not a Swedish citizen, but like you get paid. I'm a student in university, and every month I get 2,800 Swedish krona, which is approximately €280. That is what I get every month for studying. And in upper secondary school, you get €100 and more. Like I don't know the exact number, but it's more than €100 each month for studying. That's what you get. You don't have to pay anything and you get paid to study in Sweden. So tuition is so weird because you have to work hard to pay for education, when in Sweden you get paid to educate yourself. So it's like very, very, very weird. So I have like a lot of culture shocks reading American, obviously. It's very interesting because a lot of people do compare the US with Sweden. We should not be compared to each other. Sweden and the US, obviously from this video you will know that as countries we are completely different. We have completely different values and political systems, and you can't compare Sweden to the US because that will offend either the US or Sweden, because we're just too different. Like there's nothing on this list, like everything on this list is like so far from the other. Like the culture shock that I brought up and my comparison to what it's like in Sweden, it's just so far off that I don't understand when people compare the US to Sweden. Like I don't get it. Why do you do that? And that's why I don't think people should compare Sweden to the US. And that is also why I will never read a book by an American author about someone who is not American. Like an American writing a story with like set in a country that exists that they have not grown up in, and with a main character who is a national citizen of that country, which the author is not. Like I will never read that because it will just bother so much. Like I will never be able to, obviously from like from my culture shocks, I will never be able to appropriately write a story about an American living in America. I will never be able to do that, and I know it. And why don't they know it? Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. That is all the culture shocks from like being Swedish, reading American fiction. That is all the culture shocks that I wanted to talk about, because these are the most shocking culture shocks, if you so will. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like if you do, and I will see you next time. Good reading. Bye!